Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a scenario pretty much every homeowner completely dreads, a flooded house. But looking through the source material, it turns out that true mitigation isn't really about buckets and mops. No, it's actually a rigorous, super fast-paced scientific protocol designed to save a structure from absolute ruin.
48. That is the magic number. When a pipe bursts or a huge storm floods your basement, the most critical factor isn't actually the water itself. It's the clock. You see, once water penetrates your drywall or carpet padding, the ticking clock instantly starts. You have exactly 48 hours before toxic and microbial mold colonies firmly establish themselves right in your home's framework. After 2 days, you're no longer just dealing with a water problem, you're dealing with a literal biohazard.
The source material puts it pretty bluntly, saying, water moves fast. Every minute you wait, damage spreads. We've all seen those generic do-it-yourself tips online for cleaning up a spill, right? But DIY solutions just fail spectacularly in a real flood because water migration is incredibly rapid and deeply destructive. It wicks up walls, it seeps under floorboards, and it completely saturates your insulation before you even realize it's there. So, to unpack all of this, here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the 48-hour mold countdown, examine the anatomy of a flooded home, dig into the science of contamination, walk through the 3 phases of restoration, and finally, try to navigate the dreaded insurance maze. Starting off with Section 1, the 48-hour mold countdown. It's honestly a race against biology. When disaster strikes, professional response times are measured in minutes, not days. If you've ever wondered why emergency restoration companies are always boasting about their rapid dispatch speeds, it's because they are quite literally racing against the clock. Look at the massive contrast between a 60-minute professional response time and that 24 to 48-hour window for toxic microbial mold to form. In highly humid climates, like Central Ohio, which our source uses as a prime example, spores germinate on wet drywall paper and wood framing incredibly fast. Professionals essentially have to arrive within 60 minutes to extract the standing water just to make sure that critical 48-hour window doesn't close on them. Moving into Section 2, anatomy of a flooded home. To really understand why homes are so vulnerable in the first place, we're going to look at Canal Winchester, Ohio, as this really fascinating microcosm of disaster. It perfectly illustrates how local geography and construction history can basically conspire to flood your living space. In this specific Ohio region, the hidden threats are just everywhere. You've got the Scioto River watershed creating persistent groundwater pressure. Then you mix in clay-heavy soil. Now, clay holds moisture like a giant sponge, which exerts massive hydrostatic pressure that literally pushes water right through tiny cracks in concrete foundations. Add in aging, undersized 1970s sump pumps that fail exactly when spring storms hit, plus winter freeze-thaw cycles that crack uninsulated pipes, and you've got a perfect storm for structural disaster. Your home's geography heavily dictates its vulnerabilities. All right, Section 3, the science of contamination. Let's pivot away from the total chaos of a flood and look at the rigid, highly structured standards of the restoration industry. Our source introduces a really cool term here, psychrometrics. It is literally the science of drying. Restoration isn't just about throwing a big fan in a wet room. It's a highly calculated scientific equation that accounts for air temperature, humidity levels, and the precise evaporation rates of different building materials. Professionals use psychrometrics to mathematically calculate exactly how much dehumidification capacity is needed to pull moisture out of hidden structural cavities, all without overdrying or underdrying the space. Now, the water itself gets broken down into strict scientific classifications. Category 1 is clean water, like from a supply line. Category 2 is gray water, maybe from a broken dishwasher. And Category 3 is grossly contaminated, think sewage backup. But the most crucial takeaway here is that even pure, crystal clear Category 1 water automatically turns into highly hazardous Category 3 water if it's left sitting for more than 2 days. Time literally increases the toxicity of the water in your home. Physical damage has its own classifications too. While Class 1 is just minimal absorption, Class 4 involves low porosity materials like concrete, plaster, and hardwood. These materials trap moisture deep inside, kind of acting like a sponge. Class 4 requires massive specialized dehumidification because normal surface drying simply won't pull that water out from the core of a concrete slab. Section 4, the 3 phases of restoration. So, how do you actually go about saving a flooded structure once you know all this? Well, it all comes down to a strict, non-negotiable 3-step protocol. Step 1, emergency extraction. Step 2, structural drying. And Step 3, reconstruction. What you absolutely need to take away from this is that skipping any single step, or even just rushing the sequence, guarantees failed drying and future mold problems. You just cannot rebuild until you are structurally dry, and you definitely cannot dry until you extract. In that first extraction phase, it is intense. 200. That's the number of gallons of water per minute that commercial truck-mounted extractors can pull out of a flooded property during phase 1. We're definitely not talking about a hardware store shop vac here. These are massive industrial engines rapidly removing the bulk of the disaster so the actual scientific drying can begin. Looking at the timeline for phase 2, within the very first hour, heavy air movers start the evaporative drying process. By hour 48, remember, that mold prevention window completely closes, which is exactly why that initial extraction had to be so fast. Then, for the next 3 to 7 days, commercial dehumidifiers have to run continuously. Technicians are constantly monitoring them, usually twice a day with moisture meters. It really does take up to a full week to achieve total structural dryness deep inside those wall cavities. Which brings us to Section 5, Navigating the Insurance Maze. Let's transition to the final, and let's be honest, often most anxiety-inducing aspect of any home disaster, the financial cost and the insurance bureaucracy. It's the absolute biggest fear for any homeowner staring at a flooded living room, right? Is my insurance actually going to pay out for this massive, multi-day scientific undertaking? The short answer is yes, generally for sudden and accidental events. But of course, there's a catch. The absolute secret weapon to getting that claim approved is relentless documentation. Insurance companies demand hard proof. Professionals have to provide twice daily moisture reading logs to prove that the psychrometric process is actually working. They use thermal imaging photography to expose hidden water, and they use standardized Xactimate pricing so adjusters can't just deny the claim over inflated charges. Without all this rigorous data, your claim is at a super high risk of just being flat out denied. And here is the harsh financial reality of water damage. Trying to save a few bucks by delaying the call or attempting to DIY a massive flood out of your basement will routinely turn a manageable $3,000 rapid cleanup into a $15,000 structural nightmare. When water is just left to sit, building materials rot, mold requires its own highly expensive remediation, and the entire structure gets totally compromised. Speed literally saves you thousands of dollars. So, to wrap up this explainer, in the battle between water and a home, speed and science are the only winning combination. Surviving water damage requires absolutely immediate action and strict scientific precision, which leaves me with one final question for you to chew on. If a pipe burst in your home right now, what is your 60-minute emergency plan? Thanks for exploring this with me today. Stay curious and definitely stay prepared.